The Lakota warrior refused every bride until the shy settler woman offered him water. The summer heat clung to the dusty trade post like a heavy blanket, shimmering off the wagons and mule teams as settlers bartered loudly over flour sacks and tin goods. Near the back wall, the shy settler woman, Eliza Hart, the one folks said spoke softer than a church mouse, waited respectfully for her turn at the grain barrel. She held her small clay cup, hoping for a single scoop of water from the traveling well cart before heading home. But before she stepped forward, 2 ranch hands blocked her way, their boots spreading wide across the dirt as they grinned at each other. "Look who's here," one drawled, tipping his hat just enough to mock courtesy. "Little Eliza coming alone again? Must be nice being too timid to speak." "Huh?" The other laughed and nudged the first with an elbow. "Maybe she ain't here for grain. Maybe she wants to see him." He jerked his chin toward the open space beyond the post, where a group of Lakota riders had arrived moments earlier, tall and silent on horseback. Their presence had quieted the crowd, respect mixed with fear, but none more commanding than the one at their front. Standing beside his painted mare, wearing a breastplate decorated with quills and beadwork, was Wicasa Red Hawk, known widely for 2 things, never lying and never accepting a bride. Eliza kept her eyes down, clutching her cup. She had no business being near him, no reason for his attention, and no desire to be the object of these men's teasing. But the ranch hands leaned closer, smelling blood. "Maybe she wants to offer herself," the first jeered. "Heard the warrior refused every bride his own people brought him. Maybe he'll take a quiet one." Eliza stiffened, her breath catching. "Please let me pass," she whispered. The men only laughed harder, spreading their arms theatrically. "Hear that? Thought she didn't have a voice at all." Their voices rose loud enough that several people turned, including some of the Lakota riders. Wicasa's head lifted slightly, his dark eyes narrowing at the sudden commotion. Eliza's chest tightened in humiliation. She tried to sidestep, but the first ranch hand shoved a boot in her path. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue? Or are you saving it for him?" There was a ripple in the air, like a gust of wind without wind, when a low, deep voice spoke from behind her. "Move!" It wasn't loud, but it cut through the chatter like a blade. Both men froze, their smirks dropping as they slowly turned. Wicasa Red Hawk stood a few paces behind Eliza, broad-shouldered and impossibly calm, his face carved with stern dignity. He hadn't touched his weapons, not the bow at his back, nor the knife at his hip, but the air around him held a weight that needed no steel. The ranch hands swallowed hard. We didn't mean nothin'," one stammered. Wicasa's gaze didn't shift. "Move," he repeated, voice deeper now, not angry but absolute. The men stepped aside instantly, tripping over each other in their hurry. Eliza kept her head low, cheeks burning, desperately wanting to disappear. But Wicasa didn't move away. He stood behind her like a silent mountain, not speaking until the men had slunk away toward the corral. Only then did he address her, softly enough that only she could hear. "They shame themselves," he said in accented English. "Not you." Eliza's eyes widened and she shook her head quickly. I'm fine, sir. Thank you." He studied her a moment, reading truths she didn't know she carried. Then he stepped aside, clearing her path to the well cart. She hurried forward, filling her cup with trembling hands. The water rippled from her shaking, but not from fear of him. Wicasa returned to his riders without another word, but the crowd felt different now. Eyes avoided Eliza, not out of cruelty but out of startled respect. She kept her head down as she moved past the trade post, but her gaze flicked once toward the Lakota warrior. He wasn't looking at her. Yet somehow she knew he had noticed everything, and for the first time in her life, someone had defended her without asking for anything in return. She didn't know that this moment, this humiliation, this quiet intervention, was only the beginning, not of shame, of destiny. Eliza didn't stop walking until the noise of the trade post faded behind her, and the packed dirt gave way to soft grass that bent beneath her boots. She clutched the clay cup to her chest as if it were the only steady thing left in her trembling world, her breath catching each time she replayed the ranch hands' mocking voices in her mind. The open prairie felt safer, wide, quiet, honest, but humiliation clung to her like dust on her skirt. "Stupid," she whispered to herself, Stupid for even going today. Her throat tightened as she reached the riverbank, where the water ran clear over smooth stones. She bent to set her cup down, dipping her hands into the cool current to wash away the heat burning in her cheeks. The breeze tugged her hair loose, carrying with it the faint scent of wild mint and wet earth, calming, soothing, steadying. She let the water slip through her fingers again and again until her pulse slowed. But before she could fully settle, she sensed it. Another presence. The kind that doesn't announce itself, but simply is. Heavy, grounded, unmistakable. She turned sharply, half startled, half afraid. Wicasa Red Hawk stood several paces away, his silhouette framed by the dancing sunlight filtering through the cottonwoods. His mare grazed a short distance behind him, reins hanging loose, a sign he wasn't chasing, wasn't hunting, wasn't demanding. He was simply there, watching the river, watching her. Her breath caught. I'm sorry, she blurted, as though she had trespassed on land that wasn't hers. He didn't step closer, didn't move at all. You left in hurry, he said, his English steady but shaped by Lakota cadence. The men behind you carried guilt, she flushed. I didn't mean to draw attention. I never do. The corner of his expression shifted, something like understanding. He walked toward the water, boots whispering against the grass, stopping a respectable distance from her. You do not need to hide, he said, looking out over the river. Shame belongs to those who speak cruelty. Eliza stared at the ripples as though they might swallow her reflection whole. People say you refuse every bride, she murmured before she could stop herself. Heat flooded her face. I didn't mean, it's none of my business. Wicasa didn't react with anger. Truth, he said simply. Many were brought to me. She swallowed. Why did you refuse them? His gaze stayed fixed on the river, on a leaf swirling in the current. A woman should be chosen with heart, he said quietly. Not ceremony, not pressure. Eliza's hands tightened around her skirt. Most men would say yes just for the sake of appearing strong or agreeable. Strength, he replied, is saying no when no honors truth. She felt something unsteady stir inside her, respect deeper than admiration, compassion deeper than curiosity. The world had never told her no could be strength. Her no had always brought reprimand or mockery. She dipped her cup into the river, letting it fill with cool, clear water. When she lifted it, droplets clung to the rim and fell back like tiny sparks. She turned toward him, hesitant, trembling, but moved by something she did not fully understand. Here, she whispered, extending the cup slightly. For your ride. For helping me. Offering water meant nothing to settlers, but to the Lakota, it meant peace, respect, recognition of shared humanity, a gesture rarely offered by outsiders and almost never accepted. Wicasa gazed at the cup, unreadable. The world seemed to pause, waiting for his answer. His people watched from a distance. Settlers would whisper if they saw. Eliza's hand trembled. I'm sorry, she murmured, starting to pull it back, but before she could, his hand rose, steady, deliberate, and closed around the cup. Her breath stilled. Wicasa lifted it to his lips and drank, slowly, fully, as if accepting not water, but something much deeper. When he returned the cup, his fingers brushed hers, not by accident, but by acknowledgement. His voice was quiet but carried the weight of mountains. You show respect, he said. More than many who speak loud. Her cheeks warmed, but not from shame this time, from something gentler. He stepped back, glancing toward the ridge where distant dust signaled approaching figures, settler men, loud and restless. Trouble follows those who are alone, he said. I will walk with you until it passes. She should have been afraid, but with him beside her, she wasn't. And though she didn't know it yet, offering that single cup of water had just changed both of their fates. Eliza walked beside Wicasa in a silence that felt nothing like fear, more like the quiet after a storm when the sky hasn't decided yet whether to clear or rain. The clay cup trembled faintly in her hands, still warm where his fingers had touched it. She kept stealing small glances at him as they crossed through the swaying grass toward the stand of pines, trying to understand what had just happened. A Lakota warrior had taken water from her, a shy settler woman no one noticed unless they wanted to tease her. Every bride chosen for him had been turned away with dignity but firmness. Daughter of a respected chief, a skilled beadworker from a distant camp, even a widow whose family hoped for alliance. Yet he'd accepted her cup without hesitation. She felt unworthy, and yet seen. His mare trailed behind them, head low as if sensing the shift in her rider's spirit. "Did I do wrong?" Eliza asked softly, her fingers tightening around the empty cup. "Offering the water, I mean." Wicasa's steps slowed. "You offered with humility," he answered. "Not for gain, not for pride. That's never wrong." She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, wishing she were braver. "But if your people think—" "They know my heart," he said, cutting gently across her worry. "And they will know yours if they look." The wind rustled through the grass around them, carrying the scents of river, pine sap, and sun-warmed earth. It made the moment feel bigger than the two of them, as if the land itself acknowledged what had passed at the water's edge. But trouble moved just as surely as wind. The distant dust Eliza had glimpsed earlier grew closer now, turning into 3 mounted settlers from town. They weren't racing, but their direction was unmistakable. Her pulse stuttered. "They're coming this way," she whispered. Without fear or urgency, Wicasa stepped slightly ahead of her, scanning the riders with eyes trained from years of reading intent on the horizon. His fingers brushed the end of his bow but didn't grip it. "Do not fear," he murmured. "Their anger is noise, not danger." "They think I disrespected you," she said. "I can hear the rumors already." He looked down at her, his gaze dark, steady, unwavering. "You showed honor. They show ignorance." She swallowed hard. They mocked me earlier today. I think they resent that you defended me." "They mock what they do not understand," Wicasa replied. "And they fear what they cannot control." The settlers slowed as they reached the edge of the meadow, their horses snorting. The lead man, a red-faced rancher with too much authority and too little wisdom, pointed at Eliza. "We saw you at the river," he called out. "We saw you hand that cup to him." The other snickered. "You think that's proper?" another taunted. "What'll folks say when they hear a settler woman's trying to court a Lakota warrior?" Eliza's cheeks flamed, humiliation tightening her throat. "I wasn't courting anyone," she stammered. "I was being respectful." "Respect?" the rancher scoffed. "You settlers always been too easy. Your pa wouldn't have allowed it." Her father had been gone 5 years, but the jab still hurt. Wicasa stepped forward, voice calm, yet carrying all the force of thunder held in a single syllable. "Enough." The riders stilled. Even their horses sensed the shift in the air. Wicasa's gaze pierced the rancher. "The woman offered water," he said. "A gesture of peace. You twist peace into insult. That is your shame." The rancher sputtered. "She don't need you speaking for her." "No," Wicasa said, his tone softening as he tilted his head slightly toward Eliza. "She speaks for herself." His eyes met hers, encouraging, patient. Her heart beat against her ribs, trembling with fear and something stronger. She straightened her shoulders, gripping her cup like a shield she had earned. "I did nothing wrong," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. "And I won't apologize for kindness." The rancher's face reddened with embarrassment as the other riders shifted uncomfortably. Wicasa's presence alone made them reconsider their bravado. "Go back," he said. "The land is wide. Your pride does not fill it." The ranchers muttered curses but turned their horses, retreating faster than they intended. When they were gone, Eliza let out the breath she'd been holding. Wicasa turned to her, expression unreadable but warm around the edges. "You spoke with strength," he said. She blushed. "I felt anything but strong." "Strength is not loud," he replied. "Strength is choosing truth when fear tries to silence you." She held his gaze, something unspoken growing between them, shy but undeniable. And as they walked together toward the line of pines, the world around them shifted, small but certain, like the first stone placed in the foundation of something new. Something both of them had been missing, something that had just begun. The pines whispered softly as they walked into the shaded grove, the sounds of the trade post and the echo of retreating riders fading into distant memory. Sunlight filtered through the branches in narrow golden stripes, painting the forest floor with shifting patterns of warmth and shadow. Eliza followed close behind Wicasa, her fingers still curled around the clay cup, though it was no longer fear that made her grip it. It was the weight of everything she didn't understand yet. Wicasa stopped near a fallen log covered in pale green moss. He rested a hand on the smooth bark and motioned for her to sit. She hesitated. She was used to standing quietly, listening, not being invited to share space with someone like him. But the gentleness in his posture eased her embarrassment. She sat, smoothing her dress over her knees. Evan, or rather, the ache of years of loneliness, pressed at her heart as she watched him lower himself to sit across from her. He seemed carved from the forest itself, steady, silent, powerful in a way that didn't need to be proven. For a long moment, neither spoke. The breeze carried the scent of juniper, cool and earthy. Birds rustled in the branches overhead. Finally, Eliza drew a breath. "You asked if I was afraid," she said softly. "I was. Not of you. Of them." He studied her face, reading her truth as if it were a language he'd known all his life. "Fear comes from wounds," he said. "Yours is fresh." She lowered her gaze. "People talk. They judge. I'm not strong, not like other women. I freeze. I shake. I hide." Wicasa tilted his head. "You stood today," he said. "Your voice came forward." She swallowed. "Because you were there." He didn't look away. "Sometimes one person standing beside you is enough to make you brave." His calm certainty made something in her chest loosen, something she had been gripping too tightly for too long. Emboldened by the quiet between them, she lifted her eyes. "Why did you refuse every bride your people brought you?" His gaze shifted to the earth, to a small stone he picked up and turned slowly between his fingers. "Because the path of a warrior is not a path to give lightly," he said. "Marriage is not a prize, not a duty." She leaned slightly forward. "Then what is it?" He looked up at her then, really looked, and the air felt suddenly heavier, thick with meaning. "It is choosing someone whose spirit speaks to yours without words." Her breath caught. Wicasa continued, voice softer than the rustle of pine needles. "When I was young, I loved once. We were promised, but sickness came. The fever took her in 3 days." Eliza's heart sank, understanding flooding her, his stoic distance, his refusal, his guarded silence. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "Her family grieved. My family grieved. I carried her name for many winters, and the elders said I should choose again. But my heart was not ready." He turned the stone over one more time, then set it gently on the moss. "Many good women were brought to me, strong women, wise women, but I could not accept with a heart still half in the past." Eliza felt the ache of his honesty like a warm, painful light blooming inside her. She knew grief. She knew the strange shape of a wound time does not close. "People in town say you refused because no one was good enough," she murmured. Wicasa's mouth curved in the faintest, saddest smile. "People say many things, few are true," she nodded, her throat tightening. "I lost someone too," she confessed. "My mother, years ago. But the world, it didn't slow for me. It just kept going, and I kept falling behind." His eyes softened, not in pity, but in recognition. "Grief makes you quiet," he said. "But quiet does not mean weak." Her breath trembled at the truth of it. "You think I'm strong," she whispered, almost disbelieving. "I know you are," he replied. "Strength is not volume. It is endurance. It is giving water when you have little to spare." She blinked at him, startled. "I didn't think. I just—" "You gave from the heart," he said. "That is what matters." She felt suddenly overwhelmed by his honesty, by the weight of his loss, by the way he looked at her as if he truly saw her. The forest seemed to hold them in a pocket of quiet the world couldn't touch, a moment suspended, a truth unhidden. Wicasa rose slowly, offering her his hand. "Come," he said. "We should return before more trouble finds wind of you." She placed her hand in his, not out of fear but out of understanding. As he helped her to her feet, she felt something shift inside her. She had offered him water. He had offered her truth. And in the quiet shade of the pines, something unspoken passed between them, something neither of them dared name yet, but both felt down to the bone. They had barely stepped out of the pines when the wind carried the unmistakable thud of hooves, fast, uneven, and angry. Wicasa's head lifted instantly, every sense sharpening. Eliza stopped beside him, clutching the clay cup to her chest as though it were a shield she could hide behind. The peaceful clearing they'd shared moments ago now felt exposed, too open, too vulnerable. "Stay behind me," Wicasa murmured, not a command but a promise, and she obeyed without hesitation. Through the shimmer of heat rising off the prairie grass came 3 riders, the same men who had mocked her at the trade post, but now with more company and far more bravado. They fanned out, cutting off the path back to town, their horses stomping at the ground as if feeling the tension brewing in their riders' chests. The lead rancher spat into the dirt. "Thought you could hide in the woods?" he barked. "Thought you could cozy up to him and walk away like nothing happened?" Eliza's breath caught. "We did nothing wrong." "Wrong?" the rancher snapped. "You embarrassed us. You embarrassed the whole post." Wicasa stepped forward, posture straight and calm despite the menacing ring forming around them. "Your shame," he said in a low voice, "is not hers to carry." One of the riders scoffed. "Listen to him. Talks like he owns the valley." "He owns more honor than you ever will," Eliza whispered, though her voice trembled. The rancher's face purpled. "You shut your mouth, girl. We ain't leaving until we settle this." Wicasa's gaze hardened, though his feet stayed planted. "You came to settle pride," he said, "but pride is not a battle worth fighting." The rancher's jaw twitched. "I don't care about your warrior sayings. She crossed a line, and so did you." Wicasa's expression didn't change. "What line?" "She offered you water," the rancher shouted, as if the act itself were a crime. "A settler woman offering water to a Lakota. What do you think people will whisper? What do you think they'll say about her? About us?" "If your manhood shakes at the sight of kindness," Wicasa replied, "then it is weaker than dry grass." A murmur of unease swept through the riders. The rancher snarled, embarrassed and furious. "You watch your tone," he growled, pointing a finger at Wicasa. "We're not letting you walk away with her, not until she apologizes." Eliza's stomach twisted. Her hands trembled around the cup. She had apologized all her life, for speaking too softly, for taking too long, for being too small, too slow, too sensitive. But today she felt something different in her chest. A thin flame, fragile but real. "I won't apologize," she said quietly. The rancher jerked as if slapped. "What did you say?" She swallowed hard. "I said I won't apologize. I was kind. I won't be ashamed of that." Wicasa's eyes softened. Proud, protective, dangerous in a way that made her feel safer, not threatened. The rancher slammed his heel into his horse's flank, stepping closer. "Then maybe him apologizing will do," he snapped. "Take him off his high horse." Wicasa didn't move, but the air around him shifted, tightened, thickened. "If you take one more step," he said quietly, "your horse will feel your cowardice before you do." The horse beneath the rancher snorted, ears pinning back as if understanding the warning before the man did. The rancher hesitated, but pride is a foolish master. "You don't scare me," he spat, raising his chin defiantly. Wicasa tilted his head. "I do not need to scare you. I need only stand." And stand he did, solid, calm, immovable, a pine rooted to the valley floor. The rancher's horse danced sideways, agitated. The riders murmured. One nudged the rancher. "Look, this ain't worth it. We push this too far and half the town will turn on us." The rancher glared at him. "He accepted her water. That's as good as what?" Wicasa asked, stepping forward with a grace that made the riders shift in their saddles. "Peace? Respect? You fear those?" The rancher's bravado cracked. His horse jerked again, nearly unseating him. "Fine," he growled. "Fine. But this ain't over." "Only if you wish to shame yourself again," Wicasa replied. The riders turned, muttering curses but desperate to escape the suffocating weight of their own cowardice. When they had disappeared over the ridge, Eliza's knees finally gave way. She dropped onto the grass, shaking so hard the cup nearly fell from her hands. Wicasa crouched in front of her instantly, his presence blocking the sun. "You stood again," he said softly, "even when fear tried to steal your voice." She let out a single trembling breath. "I only stood because you were beside me." He shook his head gently. "A warrior only walks with strength already inside." She looked up at him, and for the first time in years she didn't feel small. She felt seen and safe, and something she'd forgotten how to feel, hopeful. The prairie quieted again once the riders disappeared, but Eliza's breath still came uneven, her fingers trembling so badly she nearly dropped the clay cup. Wicasa rose slowly, scanning the horizon one last time before turning to her with a steadiness that calmed her, shaking before he even spoke. "You should rest," he said, extending a hand. She hesitated, not out of fear, but because no one had ever offered her rest before. Rest had always been something she stole in shadows, between chores or judgmental glances. But Wicasa stood patient, unmoving, his palm open, waiting. When she finally placed her hand in his, the warmth of his calloused skin startled her. He lifted her gently to her feet, then motioned toward a narrow path winding deeper into the trees. "My people wait on the far side of the grove," he said. "There's a small camp there, food, fire, safety." Her heart thudded. I don't want to intrude." "Respect enters any place without intruding," he replied, "and you walked with respect today." She followed him through the trees until the forest opened into a sheltered glen where a small Lakota camp rested, 3 lodges made of tanned hides, a cooking fire at the center, and woven baskets stacked neatly beside drying racks. Children played quietly near the stream, their laughter soft as wind chimes. Women worked with calm rhythm, scraping hides or grinding herbs. But when the children saw Wicasa, they straightened proudly. When the women saw him, they nodded with deep respect. No one stared at Eliza with the suspicion she feared. Instead, they simply took her in, curious, cautious, but not condemning. Wicasa led her to a shaded spot near the fire. "Sit," he said. She did, folding her skirt beneath her, suddenly aware of the dust on her dress and the mess of her hair. Wicasa knelt beside the fire pit, adding a piece of pine wood. The smoke curled upward, carrying the scent of resin and warmth. A woman with silver-streaked braids approached, holding a small wooden bowl filled with thick stew. She offered it to Eliza with a gentle nod. "Eat," the woman said in accented but fluent English. "The road takes strength from the body." Eliza accepted the bowl with both hands. "Thank you," she whispered, overwhelmed. The woman touched her shoulder in a motherly gesture before stepping away. Wicasa watched her take the first bite, rich, warm bison stew that flooded her chest with heat and steadied the tremble in her limbs. Tears pricked her eyes unexpectedly. "I haven't eaten since morning," she whispered. Wicasa's brow softened. "Fear steals hunger," he murmured. "Safety brings it back." She lowered her gaze. "Everything today. It's too much. The riders, the mocking, the water. I didn't mean to draw attention. I never mean to draw attention." "And yet," Wicasa said gently, "you did not break." She shook her head. "I felt like I was breaking." "Feeling is not breaking," he replied. "Standing is strength, even when legs shake." She let out a trembling breath. "Why are you being so kind to me?" He didn't answer right away. He placed another log on the fire, his movements quiet and deliberate. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost contemplative. "Because you offered something no one offers without being asked." She frowned softly. "Water?" "Respect," he corrected. "Honesty. A gesture with no intention behind it except goodness." Her cheeks warmed. It was only a cup of river water. "To you," he said. "Yes. To me, it meant more." She held his gaze, uncertain. "Why?" Wicasa looked into the flames for a moment before answering. "Because many offer words. Few offer peace." Silence wrapped around them like a blanket as the fire crackled. The children's laughter echoed gently from the stream. The forest hummed with life, steady and comforting. Eliza felt her shoulders relax for the first time in years. She didn't feel like an outsider here. She didn't feel judged. She didn't feel mocked or too quiet or too small. She felt human, whole, seen. Wicasa stood, offering her his hand once more. "Rest," he said. "When your heart is steady, I will walk you home." Eliza looked at his open palm, strong, patient, waiting, and placed her hand in his again. For the first time in a very long time, safety didn't feel like something she borrowed. It felt like something offered freely. And for reasons she didn't yet understand, the one offering it was the man everyone said would never choose anyone. She wondered if they might be wrong. The sun dipped lower as Wicasa led Eliza out of the quiet safety of the glen. The warmth of the campfire clung to her skin, But as they stepped back into the open prairie, the world felt larger again, vast, unpredictable, the wind carrying the faint scent of distant smoke. Wicasa noticed it instantly. His steps slowed, his posture shifted, his nostrils flared subtly as he scanned the horizon. "What is it?" Eliza whispered. He lifted 2 fingers, signaling silence. She obeyed without thought. A gust swept through the valley, carrying with it a smell sharper than forest smoke. Charred grass, burned sage, something metallic beneath it. Wicasa's eyes narrowed. "Lightning strike," he murmured. "A fire passed through this land last night." When they crested the next rise, Eliza saw it, an entire stretch of prairie blackened and brittle, the fire path cutting across their route like a scar. Charred fence posts leaned like dying skeletons. Ash swirled with the wind in thin, ghostly spirals. "We must cross," Wicasa said. "The other path will take us too close to town. The riders may be waiting there." Eliza's stomach tightened. The burned field looked unstable, dangerous even in daylight. "Is it safe?" she asked. Wicasa considered with the seriousness of a man who'd learned to read the land the way others read books. "Safe enough," he said, "if we move slowly, if you stay near me." She nodded, gripping the clay cup with white knuckles. They stepped onto the charred ground together. Ash puffed beneath their boots. Burned grass crunched like brittle bones. Every breath tasted of smoke. Wicasa walked ahead, testing the ground with deliberate steps. "Watch where I walk," he said. "The fire hollows the earth. Some places fall under weight." Eliza followed closely, mirroring each placement, her heart pounding. The burn zone stretched farther than she'd imagined, 1/2 a mile at least. The heat that had once roared through here still radiated faintly from the ground. "Does your tribe fear fire?" she asked softly, trying to steady her breath. Wicasa shook his head. "We respect it. Fire teaches, fire takes, but fire also clears ground for new life." She glanced around at the destruction. "It doesn't look like anything could grow here again." "Give it time," Wicasa murmured. "Life returns where it is welcomed." She let the words settle into her chest. He wasn't just talking about the land. Halfway across, the wind shifted again, swirling ash into the air. Eliza coughed, covering her mouth with her sleeve. Wicasa immediately stepped in front of her, blocking the gust with his body until it passed. "Are you all right?" he asked. She nodded, though her voice cracked. "Just startled." His gaze softened. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is walking anyway." They moved on, but the burned ground grew more treacherous, the earth beneath them darker and more fragile. At one spot, the earth sagged beneath Eliza's foot, just slightly, but enough to make her gasp. She stumbled backward, arms flailing. Wicasa grabbed her wrist instantly, pulling her against him with swift, steady strength. "Careful," he murmured, his breath warm near her ear. "The fire is deeper here." Her heart raced, not just from fear, but from the closeness, the way he held her as though she were something fragile, but worth protecting. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm slowing you down." "You're walking beside me," he said, "not slowing me." Her cheeks burned. She nodded. They continued, more slowly now. The charred prairie seemed endless, and the sun dipped lower behind thin wisps of lingering smoke. As they neared the far edge, a sudden crack split the silence, a burned tree trunk collapsing behind them. Eliza startled violently, nearly losing her footing. Wicasa reached her in an instant, his arm steady around her waist. "Easy," he said, his tone gentler than she'd ever heard it. "The fire's voice is loud, but it cannot harm you now." She looked up at him, breath trembling. "You keep saying I'm strong," she whispered, "but I don't feel strong." Wicasa held her gaze. "Strength comes in small steps," he said, "in choosing to walk through burned ground when you could have turned back." Tears pricked her eyes. "I walked because you were here," she breathed. Something softened in his expression, something unguarded, fleeting but real. "And I walked," he replied quietly, "because you offered water." The words hit her deeper than she expected. They reached the unburned grass at last, stepping onto fresh earth as if crossing from darkness into morning. The prairie opened wide again, green and golden, untouched by flame. Eliza inhaled sharply. It felt like breathing for the first time all day. Wicasa stood beside her, scanning the horizon with ease. "You crossed the fire," he said. "Many would have turned back." She managed a small, awed smile. With you, I didn't feel alone. He looked at her, long, steady, unreadable, and something unspoken settled between them again. Not just courage, not just safety. A beginning. A fragile, powerful beginning. The valley widened into a sweep of tall grass as they stepped off the burned prairie, and for a moment Eliza simply breathed, relief, sunlight, the clean scent of unburned earth filling her chest like a blessing. But Wicasa did not slow. His gaze shifted toward a series of stones arranged in a wide ring ahead, each one sun-bleached and deliberate, encircling a patch of earth smoothed flat by many seasons of feet. Eliza felt a flutter of nerves she couldn't name. "What is this place?" she asked softly. Wicasa paused before entering, his expression respectful, in a way she had only seen once, when speaking of the woman he lost. "A naming circle," he said, "where truths are spoken, where lies fall apart." The wind stirred her hair. She swallowed hard. "Why are we here?" Wicasa turned to her fully, his voice low. "Because the writers spoke of shame. Because you were mocked for offering water, because the wind is carrying their version of the story back to town, and because truth must be set on the earth before others twist it." She tightened her grip on the clay cup. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "Trouble was already looking for you," he said. "You only stepped into its shadow." He gestured to the circle. "Come." Eliza stepped inside the ring, heart thrumming. The moment her foot touched the center, the world seemed to quiet. Even the wind softened, as if giving space to whatever was about to unfold. Wicasa stood a few paces from her, towering yet calm, the sunlight catching in his hair as he placed his palm over his chest. "In my people's way," he said, "the circle asks for honesty." Her throat tightened. I've never spoken in a place like this." "Then today is new," he replied gently. She managed a small nod. Wicasa's voice carried first, steady as a river. "I speak truth," he said. "This woman offered water with a pure heart. She showed respect without fear, and when men tried to shame her, she stood." Eliza's breath trembled. She could barely hold his gaze. "Now you speak," he said softly. "Say what is true for you." She looked down at the cup, ordinary clay, the rim chipped from long use, still carrying faint traces of river water dried by the sun. This small thing had changed the shape of her whole day, maybe her whole life. Her voice came small but clear. "I was afraid," she said. "Afraid of them. Afraid of being mocked again. Afraid of being seen as foolish." The wind stirred gently, as if listening. "But offering you water," she continued, "didn't feel foolish. It felt right, like something I could do even though my hands were shaking." Wicasa nodded. "Is that your truth?" "Yes." Her chest tightened with emotion. "And another truth is, I've never stood up for myself before today. I didn't think I could." He took a single step closer, still outside her space, still respectful, but near enough to feel his presence anchor the air. "You stood," he said. "That's enough." She blinked hard, overwhelmed. "But people will talk," she whispered. "They always talk." "Then let the wind carry truth instead of fear," he said. And with that he reached into the pocket of his vest and pulled out a small carved token, a piece of polished bone etched with a simple sun symbol. He held it out to her. "In the circle," he said, "this token means recognition." She swallowed. Recognition of what? Of courage. The world seemed to tilt. Slowly, hesitantly she reached out. Their fingers brushed as he placed the token in her palm, and warmth surged through her as if the symbol itself carried heat. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "You earned it," he answered. "The circle does not lie." Before she could speak again, a sharp whinny split the air. Both turned. At the ridge, 4 riders appeared, the same men from the trade post, angrier now, riding hard. "They followed us," Eliza breathed, fear jolting through her. Wicasa stepped in front of her, calm but coiled, like a bowstring drawn. "Stay in the circle. But truth protects," he said, "and today they will not touch you." The riders thundered closer, dust rising behind them. Eliza clutched the token, her heart pounding. The naming circle waited, still, ancient, watching. and Wicasa, standing between her and danger, looked every bit the warrior he had refused to be for anyone, until her. The riders tore across the ridge like a storm breaking loose, dust rising in fierce brown spirals behind their horses. Eliza's heart hammered as she stepped backward into the center of the naming circle, clutching the carved token so tightly the edges dug into her palm. Wicasa stood just outside the ring, feet planted, shoulders squared, his body a wall of calm defiance against the fury charging toward them. The lead rancher yanked his horse to a stop so sharply the animal reared, hooves striking the air. "Thought you could hide behind your heathen rituals?" he snarled. "Thought you could spit on us and walk away?" Wicasa didn't move. "Truth stands without hiding," he said evenly. "Only lies need noise to feel strong." The rancher's face twisted. "You shut your mouth. That girl caused trouble at the post, and we're settling it now." Eliza flinched as the man's gaze snapped toward her. "You think you can just run off with him? Make us look like fools?" Wicasa's voice turned sharp, a low, controlled blade. "You shamed yourselves." "We didn't ask you," one rider barked. "You don't get to talk for her." Another pointed at Eliza. "Get out of that circle, girl. You're coming with us." Her throat tightened. For a moment she was back to being the quiet settler who kept her head down, apologizing for things she never did, letting louder people decide her fate. But today, this place, this man, this token, something had shifted. "No," she whispered. "I'm not going with you." The rancher wheeled his horse toward her. "I wasn't asking." He kicked forward, straight toward the circle, but Wicasa moved with startling speed. In one fluid step, he grabbed the rancher's reins and yanked downward, forcing the horse to a hard, stumbling halt. The rancher lurched forward with a shocked curse. "This land is sacred," Wicasa warned quietly. "Your anger does not cross here." The rancher jerked back in fury. "Let go of my horse!" "Leave," Wicasa said. "There is no fight for you here." "Oh, there's a fight," the rancher hissed, swinging his leg as if to dismount. But his boot caught on the saddle horn, and he slipped, not enough to fall, but enough to show the men behind him that pride, not justice, drove him. One rider muttered, "This is going too far." Another added, "He's making us look bad, again." The rancher rounded on them, red-faced. "You stand with me, or you're next." But the men wavered, glancing at the circle. At Eliza trembling but refusing to leave its center, at Wicasa standing tall and unmoving like he belonged to the land more than they ever could. "You follow him because you fear being small," Wicasa said, voice low and steady. "But every man must choose what he carries into his own shadow." One rider finally sighed, defeated. "She didn't do nothing wrong, Jed," the rancher snapped. "She embarrassed me." "You embarrassed yourself," Wicasa replied. The rancher's fury broke completely then. He lunged forward, swinging a clenched fist. Wicasa did not meet the blow with violence. Instead, he stepped aside with quiet precision, catching the man's wrist mid-swing and twisting, not enough to break, just enough to stop him cold. The rancher howled, stumbling to his knees in the dust outside the sacred ring. Wicasa released him instantly, stepping back. "Go home," he said calmly. "You have lost nothing today but pride." The rancher scrambled to his feet, clutching his wrist, eyes wild. "This ain't over," he spat, but his voice cracked at the edges. His men didn't follow his rage this time. They turned their horses silently, shame heavy on their shoulders. After a long moment, even the rancher mounted again, glaring at Eliza with a mix of frustration and wounded ego. "You'll regret this," he muttered before he kicked his horse into a retreat. Their silhouettes grew smaller, swallowed by the ridge and the wind. Silence returned. Eliza felt her knees weaken. They're gone," she whispered. "For today," Wicasa said, "pride returns, but truth stands longer." She looked at the token in her hand, then at the man before her. What happens now?" Wicasa's expression softened, though something fierce and protective still lingered in his eyes. "Now," he said gently, "you choose whether fear decides your path, or you do." She stepped out of the circle, the token warm in her palm. "Then I choose," she whispered, breath trembling, "and I choose not to run anymore." Wicasa nodded once, slow, proud, as if he had been waiting for that answer long before she ever spoke it. The prairie had grown quiet again, the last echo of hooves fading into the rolling distance as Wicasa remained standing where the riders had vanished, shoulders squared and breath steady, a sentinel until the land itself seemed calm. Eliza stepped toward him slowly, her fingers curled around the sun-carved token, the warmth of it grounding her in a way she had never known before. The naming circle behind them glowed faintly in the late afternoon light, its stones catching gold at their edges, as if approving her choice to step out with her head higher than when she entered. Wicasa finally turned to her, and his expression softened in the quiet way mountains soften at dawn. "You walked through fire," he said softly, "through fear, through shame made by others. Now you stand on open earth." She swallowed hard. "I didn't do it alone." "No one does," he replied, "but the steps were yours." The last of her trembling eased. The wind brushed through the tall grass as they began walking side by side, leaving the circle behind. Birds wheeled above them in slow arcs, their shadows gliding over the meadow as if blessing the path ahead. The world felt bigger, but somehow gentler now, no longer suffocating her with expectations or whispers. After a long silence, she said, "What happens when I go back to town? They'll talk. They always talk." Wicasa walked a few paces before answering. "Let them speak. Words are wind. A woman's truth is stone." She looked down at the token in her hand. "Truth," she murmured, "and courage. The two are the same," he said. She smiled faintly, surprised by how natural it felt. They crossed through a field of soft green where wildflowers survived the season's harshness, tiny blossoms rising through the ash that had blown here from the fire. Eliza paused to touch one fragile bloom, its petals bright against the darkened soil. "How can something so small survive so much?" she whispered. Wicasa crouched beside her. "The land teaches," he said. "What lives with roots cannot be taken by flame." She closed her fingers slowly around the token. "Can people be like that?" He looked at her, steady, warm, a gaze that made her chest feel too full. "Some souls," he said quietly, "were born with roots." They walked again, cresting a small hill overlooking the valley. The town sat far off, a scattering of roofs and dust, but it no longer felt like a place looming over her. It felt small, manageable, human. "I should go home," Eliza whispered, more to herself than to him. "Face them." "I will walk with you," he replied, not as shield, as witness. Her throat tightened. "Why?" He hesitated only a moment. "Because you offered me water, and because today you offered something more." She turned, searching his face. "What did I offer?" "Your truth," he said, "and truth is a beginning." The words washed over her like sunlight, breaking from cloud. A beginning. Her heart stumbled at the thought, soft, vulnerable, but steady in a way she had never imagined. The path toward town sloped gently, but she no longer dreaded each step. With Wicasa beside her, the world did not feel sharp anymore, just real, just wide, just possible. When they reached the edge of the burned prairie, the last stretch before the valley, Wicasa stopped. "Eliza," he said, her name sounding like something honored. She turned with the wind lifting her hair, her breath caught in her chest. "If the world turns its eyes on you," he said, "stand the way you did in the circle. Let them see the woman you chose to be, not the one they tried to shape." Her eyes watered, but not from fear this time. "And you?" she asked. "Where will you be?" He placed his hand lightly over his chest. "Where truth stands," he murmured, "where courage walks." For a heartbeat neither moved. The wind swept through the grass carrying the faint song of the land, ancient and soft. Then Eliza nodded and stepped forward, toward home, toward change, toward whatever waited. But before she could take more than 3 steps, she felt him fall into stride beside her, silent but certain, not claiming her, not rescuing her, simply walking with her. And somehow, that felt more like safety than anything she had known. As the sun dipped warm across the valley, she realized something stunning. Home wasn't behind her or ahead of her. Home was the feeling settling slowly, deeply, unshakably in her chest. A feeling born the moment she offered a cup of water, and a Lakota warrior accepted it. Some wounds close when truth is spoken. Others close when someone finally chooses to stand beside you. If you were in Eliza's place, would you have stepped forward alone or waited for him to walk with you? Like, share, and subscribe for more Redemption West stories, where every soul gets a second sunrise.